Hi, I'm Jonathan J. Mentor. I'm the founder and CEO of Successment, and I help startups get to their first $10 million in annual recurring revenue. In 2024, I was nominated for the United Nations World Summit Awards for excellence in building startup ecosystems and the work we've done in the startup sector. Can governments build startup ecosystems? The answer is no. It's never been done anywhere in the world. It's a problem. In the United States, for example, arguably one of the most innovative cultures, societies, and startup ecosystems in the world, the innovation and the startups are not coming out of Washington, D.C. They're coming out of Silicon Valley. They're coming out of Austin, Texas. They're coming out of Miami. They're coming out of New York and other startup ecosystems. The reason why is that competition and entrepreneurship and the private funding that those entrepreneurial projects and startups compete for gives it that edge. When the government starts getting involved in planning, you come up with these beautiful diamond societies of technological advancement like Venezuela and Cuba. And we all see how their technological planning and government planning and innovation planning has gone for them so far. So if you want to really think about the government's role is to facilitate startup growth, is to create conditions, policies, programs, incentives, tax breaks in order to incentivize startups and startup ecosystems, to make it easier for investors to participate in startup ecosystems, to promote the benefits of entrepreneurship, but to become directly involved is a dangerous game that I wouldn't want to play. If you look at individual startup ecosystems, specifically in Latin America, because I'm here in Santo Domingo, I made the choice to come here. So I speak a lot from what I see locally. If you think about Latin America in general, all of the startups that are moving and shaking out here, they're coming from private sector investments. Companies like Nubank, Kavak, Clip, these are all venture capital firms. There's no governments that are going to be involved to come and save you. That's not the way that entrepreneurship works. The greatest entrepreneurs in the world are in a highly competitive environment where there's high risk, high reward, low barrier to entry, an ecosystem that consists of great talent, great government policy, great mentorship and leadership, great vendors, great mentorship, and great examples to follow. There are no government figures that are going to provide that to the private sector. And if they are, like, Elon Musk, for example, Doge and stuff, he's consulting the government on what they can do, for better or worse, speaking in that context. But if we think about the government's actual role in getting involved, it's actually more dangerous than you think, because the government is going to do things that benefit the government, right? Private sector is going to do things that benefit the private sector. And the more that the private sector leads that growth and all of that innovation and creativity and grit and experience comes from the private sector, that's what's going to lead it to grow. And if you think about it, you can take any specific example, countrywide, a country like, for example, Singapore, a Hong Kong, a Japan, right? Or locally, local ecosystems like Silicon Valley, New York, Miami, Austin. These are all led by the private sector, not by governments. It's not the government's job to build innovation. It's their job to build the perfect conditions or the near perfect conditions in order to build innovative startup ecosystems. Now, this is one of the reasons why Latin America, Dominican Republic, other, let's say, emerging tech ecosystems aren't really pulling forward. In addition to many of the things that a startup ecosystem requires, and we're talking about great government environment, right? In terms of policies, incentives, tax breaks, visibility. We're talking great universities that are going to provide talent, that are going to provide actual entrepreneurship programs and training. We're talking about actual entrepreneurs who feel inspired, who have a vision, who can kind of lead the charge. And the last area is venture capital. Venture capital is what's going to provide the capital that's needed to invest in things like startups. Now, what's missing in Latin America specifically, Dominican Republic, or any emerging tech ecosystem that I've seen, because I've worked with Techstars for nearly 3 years now on the programming side and mentoring and looking at different cohorts of startups, is having real revenue operations leading the charge. A lot of startups, they'll build code and they'll invest in programming and they'll do the software and they'll do the models and all the things before they actually build what their recurring revenue model is going to be. It's just like, we're just missing that one thing before we go back. Because if we keep giving you these things and these things and these things, and you still can't build the revenue, then number one, you're not building a business, you're building this thing, right? And we don't know what that is. It can be a hobby. And number two, investors aren't going to be particularly convinced that with the limited resources that you have, what are the limited results that you have? Because if I give you my capital, I want to make sure that you're building on the momentum and the traction that you already have, not that you need the capital to get everything started. One of the things that's really pervasive here in Dominican Republic specifically, and I'm sure it's happening or has happened in the rest of Latin America, is the nepotism and the over-reliance and kind of this belief that the government should come in and solve these kind of problems for you. The answer is no. Like, this is not a very good idea. If Dominican Republic, for example, or any other startup ecosystem that is emerging that wants to be the next Silicon Valley, the next Silicon Beach, the next center of the world's next Apple or Amazon or Uber, you got to take a look at those who came before us. History teaches us really important lessons. So if you think about what's fueling startup, it's always the private sector. Let's argue. Give me a public sector that has grown startup technology or startup innovation in the history of the entire world, but in the context of the last 100 years, to be realistic. But let's really think about that, right? It's always the private sector. It's never the government. So if we take Dominican Republic, for example, if you look at slightly more advanced startup ecosystems like Puerto Rico, in Puerto Rico, for example, they have Parallel 18. Parallel 18 has tons of private public sector alliances, right? Government institutions that fund data, or excuse me, not fund, but they filter data and they provide resources and expertise to private sector acceleration programs and entrepreneurship programs, and they provide expertise and they do public forums to raise the awareness, and they do startup competitions and hackathons to really call the attention of the entrepreneurial class in Puerto Rico. Same thing with Chile, same thing with Argentina, same thing with Mexico. These are not, okay, the government's here, we're the entrepreneurs. It's no. The government is working with this world-class private accelerator program or pitch competition in order to grow the startup sector. That's what attracts investors, and that's what actually builds startup technology. Now, what's some tactical advice for Dominican Republic or any other locality? Because I've even worked in smaller startup ecosystems like Tulsa, Oklahoma, for example, Cincinnati, Ohio, right? These are municipal startup ecosystems. There's tons of them all over the world, but in the context of any developing or emerging startup ecosystem, the government or the public's role should be the following. Number one, make sure that there's public and private alliances, right? Make sure that the government sector is supporting, substantiating, solidifying what's happening in the private sector. Number two, policies and incentives. Let's do tax breaks. Let's put specific programming together, or specific tax preferential treatment or tax shields in for the entrepreneurs. Same thing for the VCs. Attract them by saying, hey, we're attracting this specific kind of VC, and we know that you can invest anywhere, Mr. VC, but we're putting in together this specific kind of incentives. Number three, create the public information. Listen, these are the kind of entrepreneurs that we're looking for. This is how it benefits the government. This is how it benefits society. These are the resources that are available to you, but we're hands off. So choose these resources, and we're letting you know, as your government, we're going to protect your welfare, and we're going to make sure that these are vetted resources, right? We've taken a look at them. We know that this is a legit investor. We know that this is a legit accelerator. This is a safe space. These are the tools that you're going to need. We're putting this on for you. We want you to be successful. We're going to give you all the beans, bullets, and band-aids that you need in order to build your startup. But to directly get involved and using public taxpayer funds in order to do those things, it's a losing battle, right? I can't stress enough examples of like Cuba and your Nicaragua and your North Korea. Like, these are governments that try to plan everything, right? And that's an extreme. But the more that the government gets involved in innovation, the less it manifests in the public sphere. So if you're ready to stop thinking that the government's going to come in and save you, whether you're a startup in the US or you're a startup in Latin America, Dominican Republic, whether you're a digital nomad, doesn't matter. I have the perfect tool for you. It's called BOOM. Begin, operate, obviate, and maximize. There's a playbook that I put together for you. There's absolutely no strings attached. I don't want your email address. I don't want your name. I don't even want to know that you downloaded it. What I want you to do is for you to go out, use it, and be extremely successful in laying down the revenue operation that you're going to need to get your startup off the ground. Once you have that revenue operation laid, code and build and design and plan to your heart's content. But without revenue at the heart of what you're doing, it's not going to go as far as you'd like it to go. Not saying that it can't, but I want to make your life easier. So what I'm going to do is down below, I'm going to include a link to your download. Again, it's ungated. Don't want any of your information. What I want you to do is to go out, be prosperous, multiply, make that recurring revenue with the BOOM Playbook.